Hey there, good afternoon, and welcome to Search for Truth Reality. My name is Walter Noasat. I'm going to give you a really quick overview of the video you're about to see. This is the interview with an ex-professional psychic spy. This gentleman's name is John Vivanco. I met him at San Diego MUFON just the last week, and he graces us and the cameras and you all with an interview. And I think you're going to find what he has to say incredibly interesting, as I had. John used to work for Transdimensional Systems as a professional remote viewer. He was trained by and worked alongside Prudence Calabrese, and some of you will probably recognize that name. Now, in this video, you're going to see a lot of information about the kind of work he did, the death threats he'd received, the entrapment schemes that they did to try to get this guy out of the work they were doing, his FBI handlers who were asking him to get involved with counter-terrorism and all the different kinds of remote viewing projects he was involved in. He mentions Calabrese's book, and in that book something about the gray guy, which I think is pretty interesting. And one point I want to bring up that I think is kind of important in the context of that, just so you know going in, is that you know it's out there about the grays being devious and deceptive, and the kinds of things that came through to Prudence, I think, was probably just a big fat lie. So don't be afraid. That's my opinion. And a couple other things, two more points, and we'll move on. William Tompkins. I shared the photograph of William Tompkins's reptilian ship spraying gases over the Carlsbad Lagoon, and he's going to do some remote viewing on that. Now, in about a week's time, we'll come back, we'll meet again, and we'll review that data in front of the cameras again so you'll get to see. We'll compare that with what William Tompkins has said, what he's on record in his presentations, which you can find online at MUFON and on my channel right here, and as well as comparing it with a psychic medium who had channeled Bill and what Bill's opinions were. And we can put all those notes together, and it'll be fun and rather interesting. And of course, first lesson always is your discernment. You can decide what the truth is. I'm not here to dictate that to you. Finally, at the end of this video, we go into a bit about extraterrestrials, and I like what John has to say. Throughout this video, you're going to hear me laughing and just really having a grand old time. Please don't interpret to mean that I'm making fun of the guy. It never is. I just really enjoy being able to meet with people and talk to them and have a lot of fun. I am not making fun of it. I really appreciated what he has to say, and he made no bones about the claim he made. Finally, I'll ask you all to not like, share, post a comment, and subscribe to my channel because it helps me to keep doing what I'm doing now, standing in front of the camera and talking to you all. Thank you again, and here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to Search for Truth Reality. My name is Walter. Today we'll be addressing the topic of remote viewing, and I have a special guest with me today, John Vivanco. You've been doing this for about 22 years, is that right?
About 20. So about 21 years.
21 years.
Yeah, in that range. It's hard to know dates these days in my brain.
You want to give the audience a little bit background on how you got into remote viewing and what you're doing today?
So I started, the Ted Koppel interview. Actually, Ted Koppel in 1995 outed remote viewing, the remote viewing program, and I remember seeing that. That was the first time I had ever heard of it. I think most of the world had ever heard of it, and it was the declassification of the project, Stargate project. So I got obsessed with what that was. When I heard the term psychic spy, it's one of those things where it latches onto your brain and you can't let go of it. So I started to research as much as I could, and interestingly at that time there were ex-military remote viewers already out there teaching people how to do it. So they must have had themselves set up ready to go with the end of the declassification, or the beginning of the declassification. So $12,000, a little expensive for me for a weekend class, and very little information. I mean, a scant internet back then anyway. But I kept pushing and pushing. Eventually, people would begin to talk about how to do it, the ones that took classes, ideograms, ideogrammatic language and whatnot. And I knew that, for instance, War Collier, some of the old psychic experiments would use sort of a symbolic Gestalt type language. So I started playing around with that and kind of edging myself into it. Well, a manual went online really fairly soon, after the declassification, and I just taught myself how to do it at that point. It was basic CRV. I wanted to be professionally trained though.
Are you saying that you didn't take the $20,000 weekend training, did not go that route?
No, I didn't go that route.
Who was teaching that back then for $20,000?
I think it was David Morehouse. And I think Ed Dames was teaching it.
Okay.
There may have been a couple of others in that realm. I think Ed Dames had SciTech, PSY-Tech. At that time they were teaching. They had sort of a corporate, I don't know, structure wanting to bridge out to corporations and whatnot. So yeah, I was an artist. You know, I have a degree in fine art. I had really just gotten out of art school at that point. I had no money. Fine art, you know, is not a moneymaker, you know. So I had to learn it myself, and I'm a do-it-yourselfer, the consummate, you know, I'll figure anything out and just do it. So I did that. I wanted to get trained, but it was too expensive, and I was thinking, I'm not a real military guy. I don't know if I want to be trained by ex-spies or current spies. So I just sat on it, you know, waited and watched the community, played around with it myself. People were putting targets. My wife at the time would put targets for me to view. Eventually, the Farsight Institute popped up, and
But this is Dr. Courtney Brown,
Right.
Farsight. You can go out and look on YouTube for Farsight, and you'll find him there. If you don't know, Courtney Brown does a lot of remote viewing of future news events. So in, like, say, this month, he'll have his team of remote viewers, you know, 3 or 4 of them, run targets on the next month, and then he'll also review the results from the previous month after assessing all the headlines of the day and match it up, and it's really quite interesting. And like you, he also does like special projects. You know, you can find, one of his last ones was on the Tunguska event. Right, so you can go out there and check that out. So that just kind of establishes who Farsight is for those who aren't familiar with remote viewing. And this is along the lines of what you're doing.
yeah, exactly. Well, interestingly enough, and we'll get to this later, but there's a really interesting, strange thing that happens with remote viewing future events, which we had to do for the FBI and counter-terror later on, but I'll get to that. Okay. So Prudence Calabrese was his webmaster. She was also the person who wrote the book, The Bathroom Guide to Enlightenment. Her dealings with a small gray alien that would come and visit her on a nightly basis and give her messages, whether they were for the immediate future or people close to her, the remote viewing projects that she was working on and Farsight was working on, or things deep in the future and have to do with the greater world. So she wrote a book about this, and she became somewhat well known in that regard. She also was leaving Farsight Institute at that time, and she moved out to California. She actually moved to Carlsbad, and I was living up in Orange County at the time. I immediately connected with her, and so she trained me. She wanted to form her own. I think she brought some remote viewers with her, and they were sort of the operational team that she was working with. And at that time, you know, every single remote viewing group that people that got together after they were trained, it was really about making money. People wanted to understand how we can make money at this. So after getting trained on a professional level and really working at it, you know, we set our minds to how do we make money. We've got an operational team, people that are dedicated. You know, is it treasure hunting? Is it going after corporations? You know, we would do anything and everything. So Prue incorporated TDS, Transdimensional Systems, and we got an investor. Put in over $1 million into our company. This investor had contacts with other people in the entertainment industry, or other people in corporations, or other people in government. So across the board, there were connections everywhere. They started feeding these connections to us, and it was at that time as well that a news article came out about Sony Entertainment hiring a team of remote viewers to deal with product technology issues in future technology. So that really caused a fire under the ass of every CEO in America, especially on the technology side. Those guys didn't want to be left behind. Whether they believed in it or not, they did not want to be left behind. So because of that as well, we got a lot of contacts, a lot of people wanting to understand how this worked, what we can do for them. Now, every single thing was a backdoor deal, right? We would never go through the front door, and we would only deal with people that were CEO level or right in that range. And they didn't want anybody else to know in the company that they're doing this. So,
well, you know, Ed Dames has he has a very old video out there that even he says is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to obtain, and we found it, and we're able to look at that. And in that video, he talks about remote viewing for businesses, corporations, just along the lines of exactly what you're talking about here. So I found that rather interesting.
yeah.
That you should, it's like a confirmation, you know,
Right.
of how the business is conducted in an RV.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that would happen was that we'd set up meetings with household name CEOs. I mean, they would come to us, and they would also be driven in by our contacts on the. They would also be driven in by our contacts on the investor side. So what would happen frequently was that we'd set up meetings and they would get warned off. So we'd set up a meeting and get canceled. We'd set up another meeting and get canceled. They would cancel it. And it came back to us that, well, they told us, we were told we should let this lie. And this happened later on with our investor. Our investor actually pulled out because they were warned by some other group, some outside group, that you shouldn't be messing with this stuff.
What year was this about?
This would be about 1999, 2000, 2001, 2000, like in that whole range. So that's when we were operating up until about 2003, 2004. We shut the business down, which was unfortunate. We were paying people. You know, we were paid remote viewers. We were all working for a salary, and you know, it was a dream of a lot of these people, of myself too, to be paid to be able to do this kind of stuff.
Who was receiving the warnings about not doing this? Was it the investors being warned off? Was it you?
Multiple, yeah. It was me. It was Prudence. It was the investor, and it was one other person on the team.
Were there life threats?
Life threats, yeah. So repeatedly. This usually happened before we did a 2-week class. We used to have these long, extended 2-week remote viewing classes.
And Prudence has some online you can check out there, and there's like a couple hours of them, and it looks like a conference room, classroom. You see, sets of tables where she would run through.
Right.
All that, yeah.
That was actually in Carlsbad. So that was.
That's right here.
Yeah, that was 2001, I think. Yeah. After we had been working counter-terror, it had leaked to the media that the FBI was using psychic spies, and we were the psychic spies. And so we got a lot of students coming in at that time. That was in Carlsbad. That was the Sunday London Times was out interviewing us and they have this insert in their newspaper. I don't think anybody actually reads paper newspapers anymore, but back then, it's like Parade. When you have on the Sunday, yeah, it's like that. It's a full color insert. So they were doing a multi-page piece on us, and they came out to take the class for a week. And we set that class up. We had our professional remote viewers out and the new viewers. So Prue was taking care of the new remote viewers, along with Mike Faber, and I was doing more advanced training for our professional remote viewers. And so a really strange event happened.
There in Carlsbad?
There in Carlsbad. So this is Palomar Airport Road. There's a road that goes up into some big glassy office buildings, like about 3 big glassy office buildings over there. And it's just east or west.
Right around El Camino?
It's...
Or further up Monroe?
Well, the Palomar Airport,
right.
it would be just west of that.
Just as you're coming up the hill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know what that is.
So we would rent that place out for business meetings and teaching classes, and we had the run of the place for a week. You know, you had other office workers going in there. They didn't know what to do with us during the week, but we had the run of the place on the weekend. So that one weekend that we had, the last 2 days of the class, the Sunday London Times had left. They had spent 5 days in the class and didn't take the last 2 days, which was unfortunate because we had a really strange event. We had so much death threats on us up to that point. So telephone, we'd be talking to a friend, it would be me, it would be Prue, it would be Mike. I don't think anyone else had had that happen to them, except for maybe Cy. So
during the calls, you had some strange things. This is as the training was going on?
So we would have a phone call with a friend. Somebody would typically butt into the line. You'd hear clicking and popping, and they'd say, stop what you're doing or we'll kill you, some rendition of that. So for me, it happened one time. For Prue, it happened about 3 or 4 times. Mike probably happened about twice. It's confusing to the friend that you're talking to. It's like, what did you say to me?
Was your friend aware of what you were doing? I mean,
yeah. I mean, you know, I wasn't. The only thing that we had were certain non-disclosures on things. Some of the work that we did for government people, they were too scared to even have us sign a non-disclosure. It was basically like, well, the government's going to deny it if you ever say anything about it, and it just sounds crazy to begin with, right? But the corporations, for the most part, there were non-disclosures on that kind of stuff because, well, they didn't even want to question, right? Okay, so anyway, so a lot of death threats, breaking into our houses at times, rearranging furniture, just to let us know that they're there, they're watching us.
You mentioned something about flour too.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that would happen was that you'd get home. One time I got home, so my doors, all the doors in my house were open. And through the house are footprints in flour, just walking around. Nothing was disturbed except for these footprints in flour. So my wife was gone with my son, and I cleaned it up and just pretended like nothing happened because it was not, some of the stuff I just didn't want to recognize was happening. Or
a little denial. Yeah, just ignore it, it'll go away.
And especially with, you know, having a young son at that time, I did not want her to know. I did not want him to know what was happening. I mean, some of them I would, you know, say this and that's happening. I would let my wife know if things were happening with Prue, but rarely when it was happening with me, just so she wouldn't get scared, because she didn't like me doing it. Sorry, I thought that was a person over there. The trash can looked like
it's a gray alien. There's a trash can over there. It's just caught the corner of his eye here. Go ahead.
It's like when you start talking about this stuff, it's like your eyes start getting a little bit wider on the edges.
Look, when I laugh, it's just because I understand. I'm not making fun.
Well, no, I mean, it's ridiculous on the one hand because at that point in time, at that point in my life, I just loved to remote view. I wanted to make a career out of this. I wanted to do the thing that was most fun to me and make money at it. And I had no idea that this other stuff would be occurring. I mean, when I told people that were close to me that this was happening, it was, huh? No, you're crazy. Okay, so for one thing, remote viewing, psychic stuff, military, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and the government is, you know, working with you, like you've got handlers, and they're also somebody spying on you.
Well, that's it. I mean, you have handlers, you have non-disclosures with the government. If I'm hearing you right, you had corporate accounts as well, and you're going to have NDAs there as well. You have people threatening your life. Now, the question that I had, you know, before we started rolling cameras here was about who's threatening? What entity? Who has an interest in wanting to stop you from doing this? Is it the corporate side? I doubt it. Is it government? probably more likely, and you consider all the varying different interests involved in these different agencies,
Right.
who could it be?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we had to remote view this stuff, find out, get some kind of indication on who it is. With remote viewing, you know this, but the audience may not. With remote viewing, they're very descriptive. They'll describe what's happening. They'll describe scenes and things very acutely. But as far as giving you words on who it is, it's this government agency or that one, they won't do. It just doesn't typically work that way. And even if you do have that come through in a session from a remote viewer, we call that analytic overlay, and it's somewhat discarded. In a very broad level, it shows you, it tells you that there's a government agency there.
So to kind of summarize what we're talking about here with an analytic overlay and describing a scene, we're sitting here in a park, but a remote viewer won't say it's a park. He'll say, I can smell fresh lawn cuttings. I can, see the color green. It's a little tepid outside, very comfortable. These sorts of things. It's a clear day. Partly cloudy. That
playful
sort of thing.
Energy.
Right,
yeah.
right. There's some other subjects that are involved here. There's structures, and they describe in a tactile sort of way what they're seeing, but they won't say that there's a woman there in the dark in the park playing with a greyhound, and it's interrupting the interviewer over there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we glean from our data on this that, well, it's some type of government agency, and then you wonder why. And why is it that there would be one government agency intent on harassing us, trying to get us to shut down, and then another government agency who is working with us? We even had a couple of times where we were set up to potentially go to prison. We were working, trying to figure out how to make money. So we get a phone call from somebody else in the remote viewing field saying, hey, I've got a friend of mine who I've done treasure hunting with. He needs a team of remote viewers to help him zero in here. He thinks he's close. And I don't have time to do it. My team doesn't have time to do it. So can you do it? Oh yeah, let's do it. I was one of the viewers on it, so I didn't know that part yet. We ran through the project. At a certain point in time, when you have multiple sessions that keep feeling the same, you're getting the same stuff over and over.
Then you can start drawing some conclusions.
You're drawing conclusions.
Right,
so I knew we were on a treasure hunt. I knew that we were very close. In fact, interestingly, we know when you do remote viewing and treasure hunts, there are indications within sessions that show you if it's going to be easier, if it's going to be hard. When you have a treasure that is within, for instance, the crack of a rock, like this one was, it's going to be a little bit easier to track down than something that's buried underground and it's in the middle of the desert, obviously. So we had a treasure that was in a crack in a rock, which seemed pretty easy to me. The only question was, what kind of land is it on? So we finished the project, all the data, we have our ideas about it. It's time to meet with the treasure hunter. I didn't go to this. I was supposed to remote view on the fly if they needed remote viewing. It was Prudence, and another person on the team, another analyst that went out to Arizona to see if they can zero in on it with the help of the treasure hunter. So they get out there, they meet up at a location. He takes them, and he takes them in, right? So he takes them in driving. This is Prudence telling me this later on. So he takes them in driving, and they end up, it says National Monument, that they're driving through the gates of a national monument. And right there, it's like, whoa.
That's alarm bells, and I know why.
Yeah. That's a federal crime.
Not everybody knows why. You cannot remove anything from a national park. You cannot excavate, you cannot dig, you cannot go after dinosaur bones, not without explicit written approval in advance by the government.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they get out there. The treasure hunter says, I think, it's right over here. So they go into the National Monument. This is on National Monument property where this guy has dug massive holes in the ground.
He's already, who's done this? The guy who had the
treasure hunter.
The hunter's already done this.
Yes.
Now this is not part of your group. This is somebody else.
This is somebody that hired us for a cut. Like we would get a cut if we found this. So they get out there And immediately Prue is no way, no how, we are not going to be doing this.
Yeah.
And the other guy on the team, our team, he starts goading her saying, why not? We're here. We can come back. Let's jump the fence at night. You know, we're so close. We got all our data. And the treasure hunter's like, yeah, let's come back at night. We'll jump the fence. Let's go through the data and we'll know exactly where to go. And this is not going to happen. So our guy starts cussing at her.
Yeah.
You're a effing this, you're a effing that, F you, we gotta do this, we're here. They are trying their hardest to goad her into doing it.
Right.
So basically she backs off, she drove out there with the other person on our team, and she takes the bus back. She's like, hops on a bus.
Doesn't even want to be associated with them at this point.
No, it's done, it's over.
Yeah.
There's no freaking way. So she calls me, she's on the bus back, she calls me and she says, she's explaining to me what happened. So we get off the phone, she calls me back a little bit, just really a couple hours later, and she says, guess what? The FBI just called me. We're supposed to go into their field office in San Diego on such and such date to explain why we were digging holes in a national monument. Okay, so this is literally the day.
When she's on the bus, she's already got a call from the FBI.
Right.
Oh, that doesn't stink.
Yeah, that doesn't stink at all, right? So she takes care of it. She goes to the FBI office, explains to them this didn't happen, and gave him the name of the treasure hunter, yada yada, and it just died. It ended. So we were clean on that. We didn't do a damn thing. We backed out. And so we sent all of our data to University of Arizona saying, we think there's a treasure over here. You may want to check it out. Whether they believe it or not, who the heck knows. But, you know,
somebody's already started.
At least to get somebody else's eyes on it, you know, because, I mean, it was a setup. It was a setup to begin with.
Wow.
And then another thing happened.
So hang on. So just to kind of summarize, I mean, I'd asked about life threats, and then we, got at that, and now we have this setup.
Right.
Right, which is, some of it is, who is it? What is their interest? Why are they so interested in stopping you? So go ahead and tell us about this other incident.
Yeah, the other one was pretty scary. We were, after 9/11 happened, the FBI, I mean, they were asking screenwriters to come up with terrorist attack scenarios for them. Because, yeah, I mean, okay, aside from the 9/11 truther scenario, okay, so let's separate those two. You have an incident that did truly occur, whether it was a concocted incident by whomever within our government, or if it was some true terrorist. I just want to separate those two because I get a lot of flack on the 9/11 truther side, and I really try to keep these two things separate. The FBI, the normal FBI on the ground person, we had a major terrorist attack. 100% we had a major terrorist attack, and we got to do something about it. They're on pins and needles because they're expecting more to come, right? So they asked us, they knew us from
the FBI had asked.
The FBI had asked us to work counter-terror. First off, actually, they came to us and asked us if we would look at the retaining wall underneath the World Trade Center because there was a danger that it might have been breached in some way, and then or cracked because of the collapsing of the buildings. And if it were breached or weak, you'd get the lower Hudson flowing.
Let me stop you there for just a second regarding remote viewing.
Yeah.
Because you have somebody who manages the target, the session for their remote viewers.
Right.
Now the FBI is coming to you and they're kind of front loading you with some bits of information. As the tasker, as the person who's putting together this project, do you feel that being provided that detail of information could bleed into the field and your remote viewers can pick up what is expected to be found?
It's a good question. So we believed that the more we thought down certain pathways on that type of stuff bleeding out, or, oh look, if I can do a session where, I'm getting data from another session that I did in this other session. There's a lot of belief systems around that. So we kept our belief systems very tight, very strict on trusting the tasker for the specific tasking alone, because we knew it's a slippery slope once we started going down those pathways, right? So we believe that a remote viewer will get exactly what this tasker needs, exactly what he needs, she needs,
regardless of any kind of
tasking
front
only.
loading, right? Regardless of
Exactly.
any kind of front loading.
Right. So
Because
our viewers,
there are different schools of thought out
Exactly.
there about that.
Right.
So from your perspective, you're not really worried about it.
not worried about
Because
it.
there's the double blind approach, and then there's
Right. Right. It's a totally different thing as well. It's a totally different thing as well when you're dealing with trying to complete a job. I mean, there's the testing side and the side where you're trying to convince other researchers and people in the field of this and that, and then there's the side where they just want a frickin' report, right? So we were on the side of just wanting a report, really honing what it is we're doing. Especially when it comes to tasking method. When we had new remote viewers say, well, I think I remote viewed part of this other session I did in this session. It was like we would cut it off right there. Nope, absolutely not. You don't get into those mind tricks. That's a slippery slope. It's gonna mess every single session up. It's a loose construct there between the tasker and the viewer, and you've got to keep that thing strong. So that's what we figured out. That's what we.
Well, thanks for taking this little sidebar here. So we were talking about this other, the FBI had engaged you
Right.
to examine what was happening at the World Trade Center.
Right. So we're a large team of remote viewers. We have about five of us were paid in general. 4 or 5 of us were paid, and then we had another tier of remote viewers who were more on the student level, and they had mentors. And for myself and for Prue, we would know more or less. One of us would know, the other wouldn't know, and it would kind of go back and forth, and then we both know what we were working on. We did the analysis and the report writing, and we had the viewer's view. I would still be tasked on everything. Prue would still be tasked on everything. Some of the projects, overall projects, I knew we were working on, but I never knew because I was doing, at first I was doing 2 to 3 sessions a day, 5 days a week. That's a lot of remote viewing. It's just like boom, boom, boom. You don't remember a darn thing because you're in theta half the time because you're listening to binaural beats. This is what happens, a remote viewer who's been doing this for a very long time, who has gone through a deep entrainment process with, binaural beats and viewing, even if you're given something completely 100% front-loaded, you forget. If you go into that space, you forget.
It's like coming out of a dream and forgetting.
Right. You just start doing it. You just go through. It's like being trained, in the military. You have so much training, so you just have muscle memory.
Yeah, it's conditioning.
Conditioning. Yeah. Right. So anyway, so we had to look at the retaining wall, right?
Is this the bathtub we're talking about?
The
underneath?
bathtub. Yeah. So this is, I think it goes down 70 feet or so, something like that, and it's a massive concrete wall, rebar in it. They thought that perhaps was breached by these buildings crashing. We viewed that. We came back with, it was totally intact. It was totally safe. And then they were able to verify it with engineers a couple weeks later.
When you did that remote viewing for the bathtub, so the rubble was still there.
It was all there.
They hadn't gone into it yet?
They had not gone into it because this was about 2 days after the collapse.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what they came up with. I mean, I can't imagine what they saw down there.
Yeah, I know. Well, when we remote viewed it, we were just getting a lot of just debris. I mean, concrete. I remember, I didn't know we were viewing this at first because Prue kept it from me. And my session on it, I just remember large pillars and melted things, but the main wall that we had to look at, since this would be a monitored session, we do monitored where we have somebody else, keep us on track and a certain agenda.
They step you through each phase.
Right.
Stage 1, stage whatever.
Yeah. Oftentimes, you go into deep with binaural beats, you just end up drooling and staring at your page for a while. Monitor's like, keep going. So we had to understand, and honestly, it was like intact. There was no feeling of anything busted up, so they're fine. They get the data back from the engineers a couple weeks later, and it's the same thing. So then they asked us if we'd like to hunt for bin Laden, the perpetrator of this whole scenario. We said, no thanks, we don't want to do that. The reason why is because we did not want to have bombs dropped on potentially innocent civilians, you know. But we did say that we could do counter-terror. We could work like, you know, next terrorist attack, U.S. soil, because that would stop something from happening and save lives, as opposed to potentially killing a whole bunch of people that you know, collateral damage, right? Right. So we went on that path.
Was there anything strange that came out of the FBI? I mean, prior to the FBI incident, we were talking about the death threats and things like that. Was there anything unusual that happened during your tasking of the World Trade Center?
No, because we did not. They put us so hard and heavy on the next thing. We were doing that weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, like constantly, and analyzing. And I'm trying to understand every single type of terrorist attack that could possibly occur, what types of things happen to people when different types of biologicals hit them, chemical weapons, nuclear even. So we're busy, you know, we're loading our brains with this stuff and analyzing and trying to understand what we have. We did not look at anything around the terrorists attacking the World Trade Center, nothing at all. We were too busy with other stuff. So I don't know what that data would have shown or not shown, and you know, I mean, at a certain point we were asked to, now we didn't find this with our sort of future remote viewing. We would task the remote viewers on, describe the next terrorist attack, Al-Qaeda related terrorist attack that occurs on US soil. And we would basically use that tasking structure. Tasking is when we, you know, write something up for the remote viewers to view. We only give them a number associated with the address, as opposed to, you know, what they are supposed to remote view. So they stay blind and can't make things up.
Okay, so for newbies to RV, tasking is the person who's running the project will have a set of information that they're looking to acquire on this particular target.
Right.
Be it future, past, or present. And then there's some specific details that are, you know, what color is this shirt? I don't know how you do
it. Yeah, exactly.
There's specifics in there that you're looking for. Look at these aspects of this thing, and that comprises the target. You mentioned address. They'll create an address. It's usually like alphanumeric sort of thing, and they'll just tell the taskers, there's a target, here's your address.
Exactly. The remote viewers get the address, they work the protocol off that, and that's it. Then all that data from, let's say, 3 to 5 remote viewers go to an analyst, and then the analyst just sort of corroborates the data. You know, if there's brown over here, there's brown over there, you know, very basic. Right. Then there's brown there. Right.
There's a structure.
Right, exactly.
There's subjects here, there's technology.
And you can get very, very accurate, very detailed with that. So we were getting these scenarios, they would change, they would shift, they would change from week to week, month to month. Presumably, hopefully, because the FBI is taking action on it and, you know, plugging these holes up. It seemed to change a little too much, though, and this also gets into Courtney Brown and the Farsight Institute in viewing future events, how you can grab an edge of it, possibly, and the rest of it could exist somewhere else, you know. We don't know 100% why these events don't unfold exactly the way the remote viewing data says they're going to unfold, but there are strange variations that occur with them.
And the remote viewers protocols they follow, they try to figure out location and time frame, distance, things like this. They try to constrain it best they can, but even through doing that, you never really know.
You never really know, yeah. So, you know, one of the things we did was not only next, but within a month period of time. So from the most significant activity that Al-Qaeda conducts on US soil between such and such dates. So we would even constrain it that way as well. And if we got anything interesting, then we start digging into the events around it and build a report.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but through the course of your work working for the FBI and the government and remote viewing various events, be it Al-Qaeda or other terrorist organization, had you ever completed, if you can tell me, a session and found later on some kind of news report that kind of validated something that you had seen?
Yeah, so the stuff that we were getting early on had to do with specifically a closed dome stadium at a sporting event, as well as an open dome stadium. And the very initial stuff that we got was aerial spraying over a game, people, stadiums full, likely some type of football. I think we came to the conclusion that it was football. It was a
American football.
Yeah, American football.
For my friends in the UK.
Hey, this is YouTube, right? American football, open stadium, and also a closed stadium where the air circulates. Those two scenarios were either biological or chemical during probably a sporting event, a massive sporting event like the playoffs, some type of playoff type event. And later on, there were news reports that came out about Al-Qaeda coming up with that. I think they captured a guy who was in Guantanamo, and he had told them that we were planning on this type of event. So that lined up. I mean, you know, it's funny. It's like you do all this work for them. They never, you know, it's not like you sit down and have tea time with the FBI and talk about everything that went right with your data.
Why not?
Right. Oh, you guys were amazing. Bravo. Nah, it never worked. I wish it worked that way.
No, that's funny.
Actually, okay, so one of the times in conjunction with this particular stadium event, we had this concert, other data, a concert letting out like Madison Square Garden in New York. And we had biologicals going through vent systems within the subways, especially around the time of this concert letting out. Madison Square Garden, everybody's leaving, funneling into the subway, and you've got a biological drop through a vent on a timed release canister, and it's, you know, bleeding out into the atmosphere. You're talking like perfect. It's got to be perfect conditions because the you know, summertime muggy carrier will move through the air better into people's lungs. So we got that scenario as well. We were told that they went and plugged up they want to know exactly what vents we were getting. They went and they plugged up the vents, closed them all.
So based on your sessions, they were taking preventive.
They were taking preventative action. Yeah, exactly. And so we'd remote view the same set of questions again, and things would shift. There'd be some other scenario taking place, presumably because timelines shifted, and or they were doing something about it and stopping it from happening. Now, one thing I find curious is that at a certain point we were outed to the media. Somebody leaked it. What happened was the media came to us. Initially it was the Sunday London Times came to us, and they had heard that we were psychic spies for the government. All these newspaper articles started coming out. So they asked, you know, can we do interviews? Then we get CBS Sunday Morning and prime time, and these guys like, let's get demonstrations. You're psychic spies for America, yada yada. And I didn't want to do it. I did not want to do this. Prue asked the handler, can we do this? I don't know why she wanted to do this. Right. Handler said yes. And I want you to tell them exactly what you're getting with the remote viewing data. Very curious, I thought.
Was this before or after the threats?
The threats were ongoing. They had been going like for 2-3 years before this.
I can't imagine what faction has an interest. They're using you to help, and there's some faction out there that doesn't want you doing whatever it is you're doing.
Right,
it's
right.
Weird.
It was very weird. So we did the media. You know, we would go on like CBS Sunday Morning and remote view. I'd be on TV demonstrating remote viewing, and which is really rough. I mean, you have the production people coming up with a tasking for you, and you got to like sit there on, you know, camera.
Oh, they're tasking.
Yeah.
And they know nothing about it.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know it. I obviously don't know what I'm remote viewing.
So one of the problems with a tasker doesn't know what they're doing is you can wind up with targets that don't even exist.
Exactly. I know. Or what color underwear am I wearing? You know, I mean, crazy stuff like that. So we did that. One thing that's interesting though, so that the handler that we had within the FBI, this person wanted us to tell what we were getting. Now, is this something that, you know, when it goes into consciousness of a mass of people, does that have the ability to shift things as well, since it already exists within a realm of probability, right? You know, it's kind of like the double slit experiment or Schrodinger's cat. It exists within the realm of probability at that moment.
Yeah, does observation change the end result?
Does observation change it? You
Does
know?
knowledge of everything change things?
Right. Anyway, I mean, you know, those questions, you can run around forever on them. But what happened was later on, so we had been asked, outside of, you know, looking monthly, weekly on what's next, they said, hey, look, Al-Qaeda's got like 4 or 5 suitcase nukes, right? Okay. We didn't find any of that, you know, in our forays into remote viewing the future, but they asked, you know, can you work on this? We got to find out where they all are, right? So, okay, we're working on that, you know.
Again, does the target exist or not?
Exactly. I don't know if it does or not. I mean, we're just remote viewing, you know, we got these quick turnarounds and we just got to produce data. They wanted our raw data. They didn't care about our reports so much, my guess, but we still wrote out reports, you know.
So they got their own guys who are interpreting the data.
Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say, because when we asked,
Well, if they want to report, I mean, a lot of the data is just, it's ideograms, it's drawings,
right.
it's, you know.
But we had a different idea about it. So we asked, well, why don't you have a team that you have, your own internal team that you create and hire? You don't think we don't? And so why do you want to work with us? He said, because you guys have a totally different take on it than everybody else. And our take was, we looked at remote viewing data. We thought every single session was 100% on. It could be a couple of layers. People are viewing through concepts and metaphors. They're truly trying to describe something. It's not always physical, but they're using simile and metaphor to get through it. One moment they'll be physical, the next moment they'll be talking in simile and metaphor about even a little aspect of it rather than the whole. And you've got to figure it out. Up to that point, remote viewers, the idea of remote viewing was that if it's not physical, you throw it all away. If it doesn't line up physically, and that also really constrains a remote viewer to only doing things that they are 100% verifiable in that moment, because you line up physical data, you throw the rest away. Right. So we began to understand that we had to understand each individual remote viewer, how they see the world. Now I'm a fine artist, so I was trained how to describe how light falls on a surface. You know, that's my training. So that's how I remote view. I describe in a very physical way. I'll describe even concepts and metaphor. Like if I'm tasked on something that is more of a conceptual type tasking, I will describe it very physically, that's just how I work. A remote viewer who has a degree in writing, they're going to use concepts, metaphors, right? A remote viewer who has illustration training, they're going to be illustrative. They're not going to be 100% exactly how it is. They're going to illustrate and caricature situations. So you have to understand your viewers in order to really understand how to analyze it. And when we figured that out, which was a huge deal for us, we became much more successful than we were in the past, and we got more eyeballs on us from the government side, because they're like, whoa, they are doing something that nobody else has been doing, understanding how to analyze, you know? So that said, all of that said, we were working, trying to figure out, you know, this suitcase nuke situation. They were saying stuff like, well, they're decentralized network. If one gets caught, they somehow send message to the other, and the others, they blow up or whatever. So Prue and I both had to, you know, understand everything about nuclear devices, small nuclear devices, suitcase nukes, how they work, the Russian ones. We had to view every single thing about the people that had these things, what their whole life was like, where they were working, where they were going to detonate, the time they were going to detonate, everything. We had to come up with every single way to get as much information to them as possible.
Now, well, for you, did that involve like hard research, or is this all remote stuff?
It's hard research because I've got to understand what the remote viewers are trying to explain, as well as when I get tasked on it, I have a vocabulary that I've built up. It's like, you know, in The Matrix, the movie, where, you know, they plug the guy's head into, exactly, you know, learn martial arts. Yeah.
I know whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So when you're remote viewing, like, the more you know about things in the world, the clearer it's going to be if you ever happen upon it.
You're better prepared to communicate
Exactly.
some like technical thing, and I found that even with mediums, you know, no offense, you know, to the ones that I've talked to before, but there's a gap in them being shown something that's technical, but not really having the words to explain it, which is the value that you bring.
Yeah.
Right. So the better base of knowledge you have on those sorts of things, the better able you will be to interpret.
Right.
The RV data.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had all that type of information on our computers. I had it in reports. We also had remote viewing, like would probably be considered intelligence information. Now, we were asked to do this. We're feeding it all to them. So the laws started changing after 9/11, and, you know, the Patriot Act and whatnot came into play, and what we were doing could be construed as us having information we should not have, because we weren't under official hire by anybody. And we got word from our handler that, you know, with the Patriot Act and whatnot, things are getting a little heated around here, and just to let you guys know, if you've got any sensitive information that deals with a lot of the projects we're working on, you might get raided really soon.
Oh, God. One more thing, and it's bad enough to get live threats.
It's like,
now,
come on.
Now you've got your own government who's engaged you, now threatening to raid you.
Right.
God, golly.
Right.
What a game. I mean, it seems all this stuff is just motivated out of fear,
Yeah,
you know?
it's
It's just,
motivated out of
come on, man.
Yeah, so we, you know.
It's like, you know, they're eating their own.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, so we, you know, cleaned everything up, and, you know, eventually it just got to the point where the harassment and death threats were too much that we just shut it down. We had to.
So I noticed that your website has training. Are you still training people?
I'm training, but it's few and far between at this point. I'm focusing a little bit more on the expeditions that I'm doing and projects, stuff like that.
Right.
Because it's much more fun.
And before we rolled cameras, we were talking about Dunsmuir.
Dunsmuir, yeah.
This is crazy story. I found this thing years ago. I'm like, what? What is this? You know, and this is up near Shasta. You know, and there's the story goes, there's a woman who lives out there, took a walk in the forest. You know, she was there visiting for Thanksgiving or something, and she happened upon, you know, these people, these beautiful people, who are apparently from underneath the ground. What is it?
Telos.
Telos, yes, Telos under the mountain, which is Mount Shasta, I guess. Town under there, and she was invited in to go underneath, but she was afraid of them and decided not to go. But along her path or wherever she was walking, she found these doors, you know, in the mountain. And accompanying this article is a photograph of these metal doors against like this stone face rock. You know, you want to tell us about that? What that's all about?
That was funny. I mean, I have a friend up there, Dustin Neff. He wrote a really great book on the mysteries around Mount Shasta, and he and I will get together and investigate these things at times. So, you know, he alerted me to this location because he's got himself in front of these doors waving, and people believe that these, you know, are the doors to Telos. So he was telling me this story. So, you know, we decided to look into it with remote viewing. All the remote viewers obviously are blind. They don't know, not actually blind. I get that question a lot. When I say remote viewers are blind, I don't mean they can't see, in other words.
No, they're blind to the target.
They're blind to the target.
It's like a study, like a double blind.
Right, right. So they're blind, they don't know what they're viewing. All our data comes back with pipes, with water levels, with monitoring cameras and water lines and pumping and this and that. And I'm like looking at the data going, I don't think these are the doors to Telos. This looks like some kind of catchment station, water catchment station, or storage area, storage tanks in there somehow. So I started digging around, and it was the Castle Rock Water Company. I get to their website, and they have this site listed as one of their catchments. They store water in there, and they've got pictures of the inside of these caves. with water levels, and so they're monitoring it constantly. Then I also found at a blog, Dunsmuir City has a blog, where a city employee wrote a post imploring people not to vandalize their water source, thinking they're going to get to Telos. So there you go. I mean, even on some of the photographs, I saw these other photographs where you back out a bit, there's pipes. You can see pipes coming from under the ground. It's like, okay.
It's selective.
It's, yeah.
Look at this beat,
There was one guy who was selling maps to this location because he was claiming it was actually J.C. Brown's cave.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, now easy to figure out. It was water catchment. It's water catchment. Well, I'll tell you, so we had done some projects on ECETI, remote viewing, because we were looking for locations to film demo reels on certain things. Sure. And so I thought ECETI was a really good candidate. And so we remote viewed. We were supposed to go up there, but we never made it up there. We remote viewed some very specific scenarios that happened that are on film of these lights moving around. So we wanted to identify what those lights were. Every time the viewers would come back with this sort of, okay, there's a craft type thing, but there's also a being that merges with it. So it's not three-dimensional. It's not like there's a craft sitting there.
It's not a helicopter or a jet or an airplane.
Nothing like that. No, people would talk about cat-like, the remote viewers would talk about cat-like.
Your remote viewers were talked about cat-like beings?
Yeah, cat-like beings. They would go merge with some other form and fly around and then unmerge. Very interesting.
Well, you know about James Gilliland's story and the ones he talked to. Do you know about Bagheet?
No, huh?
Bagheet is a feline being.
There you go. I mean,
he's got a drawing of her.
Are you kidding me?
No, he does. He's got a drawing of her. Now, here's the thing.
I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, you and I will talk some more, probably off camera. What everybody knows who looks at my channel is that I've had a contact experience, but I've not gone into any details about it. That's a face-to-face, over the lunch long conversation. Right. You had an opportunity to hear some of it.
It's pretty cool.
I mentioned Bagheet, right? I don't think I mentioned the name.
No, you didn't.
Bagheet was one of them.
You're kidding me. That's really fascinating.
It is fascinating. And you're fascinated by hearing. I'm fascinated. I was fascinated when it happened.
Oh yeah.
I didn't expect that. Man, that was like a bucket thing. Let me try this. Right. I'm a technician. Yeah. I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, there's a connection there. Up there, you're remote viewing these craft in the sky, and you're finding cat beings. James talks about the felines all the time.
Right. And we're used to uncovering hoaxes. When we remote view this stuff, honestly, when I began to view ECETI, I figured it's probably true just because of all of the reports and the video. I mean, they lay it out there for everybody.
Well, you've got all kinds of video footage out there.
All kinds, right? And there's no fakers really here. There's just exaggerators along the edge, right?
Well, there's also interpretation too. Of what you're saying. They're all this. Oh, thank you for showing yourselves in the sky, like they're talking. He's like, do you really know what that is? Right. The eye sees one thing, but it's the mapping onto what you see in the sky.
Right.
That I think you got to really be careful about.
Yeah.
For me, I trust my own personal knowledge versus somebody else's mapping.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what's interesting, so on that note, when you get to misinterpretations, I mean, it could be piezoelectric phenomena. We actually found that when we were running a project on Joshua Tree National Park.
But that was on the ground too.
That was on the ground, right? Where somebody claimed they captured a photo of an alien, and it's these weird light wisps. Data all comes back as just the rocks releasing energy, and looking into it, the whole area is known to produce a piezoelectric. Remote viewers are talking about electrical energy coming from the rocks, which is really fascinating. So you can actually figure things out as opposed to just following the line that somebody tossed for you on this is an alien.
Yeah, didn't the park ranger say that happens all the time?
Park ranger, who used to work out there, said that it's known, people will see shimmering sort of waveforms of light that come and go that are very brief. Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually cool that they captured piezoelectric phenomena on camera. Yeah. That's a rarity. But to claim it's an alien, no. Yeah. No. Mm-mm. But ECETI, now that's a whole different story.
I love that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That place is full of aliens.
You're so confident in that. That place is full of aliens.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny because, you know, I've been doing this for so long. We worked on the corporate level. We worked for hedge funds. We worked for computer companies. We worked for the government, the FBI. Over and over, you know, getting this verified, that verified, this verified, that verified. I understand how to treat data. And so when I get data back on something and I've done analysis on it, it's over for me.
You're not making any bones about it. You're
Right.
saying ECETI is full of aliens.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah.